Thank you for listening to All For You Stories, real stories to get you to think different so you can act different. Let's go. Through the fire. It did not surprise me when the car cut off again. Since we had been in line, the engine had already stopped twice, and I feared it would not start back up again. I used to like it when the car broke down because I got to steer while my mother pushed. But now my mother made me go to the rear of the car, put all my weight against the trunk, and push as hard as I could while she steered with one hand and pushed from the driver's side. The whole time, I stared at the ground in front of me, praying no one I knew saw me. My mother let out a huge sigh, closed her eyes, and tried to restart it. The engine coughed, wiggled a little, and then started up. She smiled and pulled forward, and I smiled too. But as the line moved, the reason we were there became impossible to ignore. My mother felt the same and tried to ease the situation. Everyone says it doesn't hurt, it's just uncomfortable. Just do your best to keep still, and it'll be over soon. Her comforting words temporarily settled my mind, but when I saw a nurse remove the wrapper from something that looked like the length of a yardstick, I nearly peed my pants. "Dang," I blurted out. Imagine her sticking it into my face. A baby screamed in the car to our left, and I understood why. The scream got louder, and I felt like getting out and running away. My mother pulled up, and a nurse with braids hidden under a cloth cap approached us. I could not see her mouth through the mask, but I could tell by the way her eyes shifted that she smiled. She instructed my mother to turn off the engine, which I thought might be a mistake. "What's your birthday?" the nurse asked. A different nurse approached on my side of the car and asked me the same question. I stared at the mega Q-tip in her hand and forgot the answer. While it did not appear thick, its length made me think that it would reach my brain. I mumbled the month, day, and year of my birth. She checked it against the writing on a slip of paper and leaned in. "Wait up!" I screamed. This caught my mother's attention, and she held my hand. I looked at her, and she looked at me. The nurse on her side clearly had more patience than my nurse because while her eyes continued to smile, the nurse on my side frustratingly said, "Come on now." My mother squeezed my hand and said, "Keisha, just look at the cross." My eyes shifted to the necklace dangling from the rearview mirror. I still felt afraid, but I knew I could get through it. I took a deep breath, rested my head against the back of my seat, and tilted my head up. The nurse reached through the window and advanced the spear into my nostril. She pushed and pushed and pushed until my eyes watered. I think I screamed, but I did not hear any sort of sound. The immediate impulse to sneeze filled my head, and it felt like it does when you are swimming and get water in your nose. I let go of my mother's hand, and we both snorted, coughed, and wiped at our noses while the nurses gathered everything up and left. The car started, and we left the hospital parking lot. We had a short drive to our next destination, and I rubbed the outside of my nostrils the entire way. Soon we were in another line of cars. This one was nowhere near as long as to get the COVID test, but we still had to wait. We were just about to enter the parking lot when my mother's phone rang. I could count on one hand the times my parents talked, and it did not end in an argument. And this was not one of them. After a dry hello, it did not take long for my mother to forget her Christian ways and start yelling at him. Usually I did everything I could to stay out of their drama, but this time I listened. My dad did not have the money he promised, and she did not know how she would be able to pay the rent or the light bill. She repeated this several times before hanging up and talking aloud as if he remained on the phone. I've seen my mother like this plenty of times and knew how it would go. She would calm down eventually, and all I could do now was wait. I rolled down my window to listen to the church's pastor speaking through a megaphone as several church members passed out boxes of food. "Going through the fire makes you closer to Jesus. Going through the fire refines you. Going through the fire makes you stronger, makes you wiser." We thanked the man for the box and drove away. I did not know if my mother had calmed down, so I stayed quiet. We got to a stoplight and the car shut off. My mother tried to restart it. The engine choked and gagged, but it did not start. She tried again and got the same result. I looked around to see if anyone looked at us. Eventually, my eyes settled on my mother, who, to my surprise, sat in her seat smiling. I waited for her to say something, but she did not. Instead, she kept her eyes on the cross and said, "I hope this fire makes us stronger." I'm not sure what she meant, but she smiled. Her smile made me smile. She turned the key one more time, and the engine roared for a second and then cut off. Her eyes stayed on the cross. The smile stayed on her face, and she asked, "Are you ready to push?" Thank you for listening to All For You Stories. Please like, discuss it with somebody else, and then do what needs to be done. Peace.